back, everyone. Miss Nancy, the Children's Librarian at Azle Memorial Library here, and I have got some wonderful, wonderful books for children that I'm going to show you. I always start with a picture book, and my choice this time is called The Entertainer by Emma Dodd. Now, Emma Dodd is known for a lot of children's picture books. Usually, they have very few words. They're very simple for toddlers. However, here she's crafted a different kind of a story that needs a little more text. So I think it will attract a little older child, and it certainly is a fun book. So what is happening in this story is that there's a birthday party going on, and the kids are anxiously awaiting the arrival of the entertainer whom the little girl's parents have hired for the party. So the doorbell rings, Mom opens the door, and there stands this cuddly, lovely bear. Well, they just go crazy. This is awesome, a bear for their party. But is he really the entertainer? And in a sort of cat-in-the-hat kind of style, Dodd takes this party into total chaos. And you can see that with the pictures. They start out nice, but then things get crazy. Things are flying. Look at this one. The bear even falls asleep on the table. And there's a twist at the end that I guessed, but young kids probably will not guess it, and they will love what happens at the end. And one thing that I really like about this book is that, first of all, you can see that the illustrations are very large, and so that it makes a great book for young children. But I also like the way Dodd took all the action words and made them much bigger. So glug, 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 crunch, crunch, crunch. Crash is in a much bigger type than the rest of the story. And so it really emphasizes all the craziness that is going on at the party. So the illustrations are by Emma Dodd as well, and I invite you to try this one with your little one sometime. It's a fun book to read together. The Entertainer by Emma Dodd. Now I'm going to move into nonfiction like I usually do, and I picked two books this time. This one I loved. It's called Mesmerized, How Ben Franklin Solved a Mystery That Baffled All of France. And we first have to talk about the word mesmerized. So kids are going to learn a big word when they read this. And we all know it as someone being kind of in a trance, not able to turn their head away from whatever they're looking at. But here, we've got Ben Franklin involved, so it gets a little interesting. So in this part of the story, part of Ben Franklin's life, because it is nonfiction, Ben Franklin has gone to France to beg for money to fight the American Revolution. And while he's there, he gets caught up in this frenzy that's going on about a certain Dr. Mesmer who claims that he can cure anything with this force through his magic wand. And he calls it mesmerizing. Any kind of illness, any kind of craziness you have, he can mesmerize you through that wand. Ben Franklin does not believe this at all, and he sets out to prove it. So he uses the scientific method to go about studying this. And while he's doing that, he comes upon something that we still know about today, and that is the placebo effect. So he uses his little placebo that he uses is a blindfold, and he proves that Dr. Mesmer is not curing these evils and these ills, but the cool thing about this is that the placebo effect is very well documented in medicine, and kids will learn that it is where a pill is not really a pill or a medicine, but people use their mind to heal themselves because they think it is. So I love this story because of all that factual stuff. It is by Mara Rockcliffe, and it's illustrated by Jacopo Bruno. I love his pictures. They are very old-fashioned, lots of little details in them, also very large. And he takes some of them and puts them in script, so it kind of evokes what it was like in France in the 18th century. And he has these, banners here that are really cool. So it's all different as you're going throughout the story. And that was really cool, too, because it kept my interest. And the even really cool thing about this book is the end papers. Those mesmerizing swirls that if you look at them long enough, they will move. So try Mesmerized, How Ben Franklin Solved a Mystery That Baffled All of France by Mara Rockcliffe. My next nonfiction is part of a series, very simple title. It's called Curious Critters by David Fitzsimmons. And Fitzsimmons is a university professor and a photographer, and he decided that he was going to create these amazing books built on photographs of all kinds of critters all around the world. So what we get in this book are totally white background. It's just the animal, and there's nothing to distract you from that animal, and then a little bit of facts about the animal, but done in the way where the animal is talking to you and telling you what he or she is like. Sometimes they get into a competition. In this section, the southern flying squirrel and the big brown bat go at it to decide who's better. And he has little poems in there sometime as the text and not just plain sentences. I call this book a lingerer because it's the kind of book that you will pick up and you'll just sit and look at that picture for a long, long, long time, and you will get lost in the photographs and spend a lot of time with this book, even though there's not a lot of text. He has a couple other different ones. One, he has a marine life. He says that, Fitzsimmons says that he thinks that all creatures and critters are curious, and that's why he named it Curious Critters. A lot of the animals that you find in this one are animals that you'll see all around your neighborhood. So they're not unusual, but they become really interesting in this kind of format. So it's Curious Critters by David Fitzsimmons. Now we'll move on to juvenile fiction. And the first book I have to offer, I don't have the book because someone has checked it out and they need to bring it back. Please, please bring it back. So it's called If You Find This by Matthew Baker, It's a very quirky story. It's like Holes by Louis Sachar, and it's about a kid who doesn't really feel good about himself. His family is supposed to be moving to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but he does not want to go because a few years earlier his brother died. Lift it up. Thank you, Cher. And a few years ago his brother died, and they buried his ashes near a tree at his house, and he does not want to leave his brother. So he tries to find some way to get some money to make sure that they can pay all their bills and not have to move. There are a lot of bullies in this book, friends, and he has a grandfather who's a criminal. And when he gets out of prison, he tells everybody he's got this treasure somewhere, and so off Nicholas goes to try to find that treasure because he thinks if he finds it, he will be able to stay. What I liked about this book was that Baker inserted musical terms for the volume of a person's voice, however they're speaking. So if they're speaking very loudly, he puts in very, very tiny type, fortissimo. And so you learn a lot of musical terms. And I also liked how Nicholas himself plays the violin and uses it to express his emotions. He's only 11, but he's very advanced for his age, so they moved him up some grades, and now he's in middle school. And we all know how tough middle school is. Certainly tough for an 11-year-old. Though some of those parts were really kind of painful to read. But I love the way Nicholas would describe his emotions. He would explain that, well, when you play a violin one way, it becomes a fiddle. And when you play it the other way, it becomes a violin. And that's how he was feeling. So I think it was kind of important, it's kind of important for kids to read this so they understand all those up and down emotions and how it's pretty normal to go through life like that. But the most poignant thing about this book was Nicholas saying at one point, if I could do anything, become anything, I would want to be normal. So he doesn't feel normal, even though he is. And so boys will get into this book because there's a lot of snark in there and it's really fun. But everybody needs to read this book to understand that you're okay. And it's called If You Find This by Matthew Baker. So my next book is called The Lost Track of Time by Paige Britt. And I first want to say thank you to Scholastic Publishing for providing a fully published copy at their brunch at the Texas Library Association Conference back in April. We really appreciated that, and I got to hear Paige Britt and Martha Brockenbrough and Spencer Quinn read part of the story. So when I got back home, I dove right into it. If you've ever read The Phantom Toll Booth, The Lost Track of Time is a lot like that. And it has a lovely message about creativity and the forces that try to block it. So in the book is a little girl named Penelope, and she is a totally overscheduled child. She has a planner that every day, every line is filled precisely all the time. She has no downtime at all. And one day, she turns her page over in her planner and she sees it is blank. There is absolutely nothing written in there. She has nothing to do, and she is shocked. She really doesn't know how to react because she's never had that before. Well, all of a sudden, with that nothing to do, she kind of drops into this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, into another world where she meets a lot of interesting characters, including the Great Moodler. You'll have to read the book to find out what moodling is and who the Great Moodler is, but the Great Moodler takes her on a wonderful journey to help her discover how to live without being a slave to time. So in the book, there are lots and lots of wordplay in the story, and there's also some wonderful, the illustrations are done by Lee White, and they're beautiful. He used just pretty much two colors. It's kind of a purple and a white of various shades. Some of the illustrations are two-page spreads, and some of them are just little small ones. And I just love the detail in them. I love to stop and look at them, and it really made the story even better. In the book, there's also every slogan, every cliche, every proverb, every turn of phrase about time that you could ever imagine. And one of the ones I'm going to read to you, the Great Moodler tells Penelope, the only time you can spend the only time you can spend is the time you have right now. And the time you have right now is all the time in the world. And so I love that phrase and that idea. I hope that kids will pick up this book, and after they're done with it, they'll begin to see that just sitting around thinking and doing nothing is actually doing something, and it's very creative, and that's how we get creative ideas, by just sitting around thinking and doing nothing. And that really is time well spent. So dive right in and try to find that lost track of time with Paige Britt, and drawings by Lee White. My next one is a very fun middle grade book. It reminded me a lot of Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. It's called The League of Beastly Dreadfuls by Holly Grant. And there is a sinister plot in this book to capture kids and take them to an asylum, which has been abandoned. Now, two women, they call them the aunties, they are running this place. And we think they're capturing the kids so that they can feed the kids' hearts to some really awful creature. But Anastasia, the girl in the book, she gets captured, and she quickly comes to see what's going on. So she uses her brains and her wits to get a lot of clues and try to make an escape plan. She has two fairy-like kids that are her sidekicks that help her, which makes it sort of fantasy. And this is a first in a series, so it's not resolved at the end, which is okay. I liked the Lemony Snicket type approach that Grant used, where she uses big words and as part of the dialogue she defines them. She also has the warning, like, if you don't like scary things, you better find another book to read, kind of thing that Lemony Snicket did all the time. There's lots of bad things that happen to Anastasia, just like the Baudelaire kids. And it's all very dark and gloomy, but it's a fun dark and gloomy. The black and white illustrations by Jose Portillo are wonderful. This is one of the portraits in the asylum, and they're really creepy, but fun creepy. And I just love this book. Everything about it is just a fun read. Not really that scary at all. So it's The League of Beastly Dreadfuls by Holly Grant. The next one I have is another fantasy, and I like to think of this kind of as a Roald Dahl kind of a book. It's called Ms. Rabscott's Girls by Elise Primavera. And the plot is that there are 5 girls. Their parents are just too busy to take care of them, to teach them anything. So they pack them up in physical boxes and mail them off to Ms. Rabscott's school. And Ms. Rabscott is going to teach them the most basic things of life that their parents just don't have time to teach them. One of the girls' parents is even just too busy to seal the box, so she falls out on the way, and the other girls have to find her. It's quite an adventure. We think throughout that Ms. Rabscott is really mean and doesn't like these girls, but she really cares about them, and she wants them to learn to grow up to be independent and confident girls. Each girl has her own personality, and that was fun to watch. The illustrations in the book are so much like Brian Selznick's illustrations in Hugo Cabret or Wonderstruck that I had to look to see if he did them, but he didn't. And I love to look at the illustrations. They also tell part of the story, which is what Selznick does with illustrations as well. So that was a nice addition to the story. If you're wondering where the boys are and why there aren't any boys of busy parents, well, there are boys of busy parents, but they're at a boys' school that's right down the road. The school is in a lighthouse, which figures in, and the girls do learn to be independent and confident, and it's a fun fantasy and a fun read. So try Ms. Rabscott's Girls by Elise Primavera. This one I was so excited to get because of the author, and I couldn't wait to read it. It's Witherwood Reform School by Obert Sky, and some kids will know Obert Sky from his Love and Thump series, which was very, very popular a few years ago. I love this book. It's the first in a series, and the story does not resolve at the end. It kind of leaves you hanging. But it's sort of like Lemony Snicket and Roald Dahl. Sky warns the reader, like Lemony Snicket, not to open this book if you can't be brave, or you don't want to read bad things. And there are a lot of bad things that happen to these kids. So the kids in the book are Tobias and Charlotte. And one day they get in trouble. They get their dad so mad at them for misbehaving that he puts them in a car and drops them off in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere. And they're just standing there. And then he goes home, but he has second thoughts, of course, and he turns around to come back and get them, but he has an accident. So he can't get them. And it turns out that he has dropped them off at the base of Witherwood Reform School, which is sitting on top of a mesa in the desert. So they are in this reform school now, and they have to try to escape because it's not really a reform school. I love that Skye uses big words and lets the kids learn big words. There are evil characters who are really evil. And there's a whole element in here about Hope getting dashed, except not for good, because it's not completely wiped out. We don't know what this school is for. We don't know why it's here. Skye keeps that hanging for the next book. So we know it's not really a reform school to make you behave better, but we don't know what it is yet, and that was really cool. The illustrations by Keith Thompson were really awesome as well. And I'm just loving the illustrations in middle grade books now because they are really good. He even includes a lot of filigree around the chapter headings and things like that. So that was really cool. It creates that atmosphere of sinister. And you're going to root for Tobias and Charlotte. You care what is going to happen to them, even though you don't know what will. And you're just going to have to wait after you read this one for next March, because that's when the next installment is going to come out. So get together with Tobias and Charlotte at Witherwood Reform School by Obert Skye. And my last book is historical fiction. I love historical fiction, and I hope that more kids will get into historical fiction because it's a really great way to learn your history without it being just memorizing facts and figures, and you really can get an idea. Because authors of historical fiction, while the character may not have been real or lived, insert a lot of factual things into the story so that you get a good foundation for what's going on at that time of history. So this book is called My Brother's Secret by Dan Smith, and it takes place in Germany in World War II, and we get this is just at the beginning of World War II, and we get a really good introduction into Nazi Germany and the SS, Gestapo, Hitler, the Hitler Youth, which was the group that all the kids had to join at a certain age, and all the indoctrination that kids went through during that time. This is about a kid named Carl, and he is caught up in this brainwashing, only to become transformed as time goes on. So Carl has just turned 12, and now it's time for him to join the Hitler Youth. And he is so in love with Hitler and the Third Reich that it was hurtful to me to read. I hated reading those parts because I just wanted to reach into the book and grab him and shake him up. It's like, how can you love this? This is awful. But he is so brainwashed by this idea of great Germans and all that kind of thing, and the grooming that they did of the children. You'll see how they brainwashed them, and that was very interesting. He's so blinded. But his older brother is not blinded. He sees the truth, and he sees what's going on. So he rebels against it, and he joins a protest group that splashes protest words on walls, and will take the leaflets that the Allies dropped in Germany, and he would pass them out to people trying to combat what Hitler was doing. Now, of course, none of this goes well for anyone, and people get hurt, but it does help Carl to see the truth about Hitler and the Third Reich. I liked in this book the way Smith focused on this war of words. Hitler's big tapings of big, massive speeches in courtyards with thousands and thousands of people versus the resistance efforts to combat it. And I learned about a group called the Edelweiss Pirates, which I had known nothing about. So that was very cool. I also thought that after kids read this, they can kind of discuss something about the burning of books. Near the very end, Karl burns his copy of Mein Kampf, which was Hitler's autobiography. And I had to look at that in light of all the massive book burnings that the Nazis did at the beginning of the war. And you can kind of question, well, is his burning of Mein Kampf a protest, or is it also censorship? Is it right or wrong to burn objectionable material and to try to obliterate ideas that you believe are horrible? So it would make a good discussion for a class or a small group. And the story was a lot of action, a lot of good facts about that time of history, and the little kid Karl, you really care what happens to him, and you follow him as his eyes are opened over the course of time. So try My Brother's Secret by Dan Smith. And that's all I have for you today. Check back next time I'm here and we'll see what other great books we have. Bye!